Sherbet posted at the gate, let out a shrill ringing to the high, clear notes as they burst into the fresh morning air, heralding the day to come. The students burst out of the gates of Clearwater High, very loud with life, like an overflowed river, loud with a laugh and chattering that drowned the quiet sounds of the small town. Zaina, too, was among the crowded walkway, but more like a ghost of presence. She moved ethereally, graceful but nervous. The silver of her hair struck starlight, shimmering as if the moon's own river ran down her head. It flowed down her back in such finely spun individual strands of starlight. Her eyes were so bright and sharp a brilliant blue that they seemed to cut into things while searching the world around with a wary alertness, as though fathoming some shoal. But Zaina's clothing had been picked out, in a third try to slide under the radar, an ordinary, dull blue sweater that matched the tint of her eyes, and dirty jeans that partook of the universal student's grime. She partly succeeded in her attempts. But her shoulders hunched just a little as she moved through the crowded halls, as though she might gingerly shield herself from all the stares and whispers rolling on after her like shadows. The students at Clearwater High, not so much. What made her at peace was the quiet and ordered sanctuary of the library. Then, with a welcome creak, the heavy wooden doors flung open, and Zaina stepped in, her body easing at the familiar scent of old paper and dust. The library, rows and rows of all that concerned human knowledge, shelves piled from ancient texts to modern novels. All these made her take refuge through the pages of books, where worlds opened up alien and varied as her own inception. She had taken the corner of the classroom, a niche across a large window overlooking the rear courtyard of the school. The window was tightly shrouded with heavy curtains that let in the light only mildly. Then, taking her place on her favorite chair, old and deformed, a little shabby armchair, she opened a book she had been clinging to. It was an anthology of science fiction, one that told of tales from distant galaxies and cosmic adventures, very much like her own pursuit of Earth. But even from this quiet corner, Zaina wasn't being left alone entirely. Gradually, she read hushed but malevolent snippets of conversation that reached her ears. Alien. Each word was a pinprick, but Zaina never once looked up from her book. But today, something was different. She was reading, and the shadow fell on her page, so she looked up. There were students right at the edge of her table, looking almost curious but disdainful, and the leader, an almost curious and disdainful girl with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, leaned forward. "Reading up on your inbred family members there, Zaina?" she laughed, the rest of them chuckling in. With fingers that seemed to steady themselves on the cover, with a pressure that said nothing of the turmoil within, Zaina slowly closed her book. The answer, when it came, was low yet definite, without anger. "We all share the stars," she said softly, her eyes holding his gauntlet. The bullies, unaccustomed to this kind of defiance, which was not hot but cool, hesitated. Their laughter died, and awkwardness dealt a new card for the game. They retreated, leaving Zaina alone again. As the echoes of their parting sounded away, Zaina turned the pages of her book, her eyes running over the lines. But certainly her mind was far away in thoughts of home, thinking of a place among the stars where being different was not a curse, but an ovation in diversity. Here, on this small clod of earth, she was an anomaly, but there she was Zaina, the daughter of the cosmos, where her light was not dimmed but revered. And thus, under the pressure of human glances and whispers, Zaina's day passed, every moment a step through a world that was not hers, but that she had to take with all the grace of the stars that guided her. Chapter 2: First Encounter. The days grew shorter still, and a chill began to settle over the town of Clearwater. A new sense of urgency came over the students at Clearwater High to move quickly through the halls, trying to get one step or two ahead of the bitter chill that surely would be the precursor to winter. Echoing footfalls through the maze of lockers frequently became the stage for dramas, small and significant. Zaina moved so gracefully down the corridor that she was sure eyes followed her more than the cold did. She was the whisper of otherness in the crowded hall, her luminous skin, the otherworldly luster of her hair, making her a beacon of curiosity, and for some, a target of curiosity. On a particularly gray afternoon, as Zaina made her way to the upcoming class, she was blocked by a group of bullies, with their leader being a boy named Mark, always swaggering, always spouting a string of nasty comments, with a smirk that never seemed to light his cold eyes as he blocked her way, flanked by his usual entourage. "Well, Zaina," Mark sneered as he stepped even closer, gabbing all through to the mothership with these signal things. He flicked a finger by her temple like some kind of eerie, sci-fi antenna. Zaina clenched her jaw slightly, her hands hanging nervously at her sides as she made fists. She tried to take a step past the group when Mark darted in front of her again, the laughing posse throwing out more taunts, the walls of the hallway beginning to squeeze shut with their cruel laughter. Jake burst through the door, then, so sudden in his entrance that it was almost like the coming of a summer storm. He was tall and broad-shouldered. His stride was easy, and he seemed wholly at home in any environment. Normally, that would be when his kind, his warm, inviting eyes, would narrow upon their surroundings, taking it all in. "Hey, bug off!" Jake's commanding voice boomed down the hallway. He moved with a deliberate calmness down the hall, putting himself between Zaina and Mark. "That's enough, Mark," he added, his tone brooking no argument. Everyone was surprised by Jake's interference, but Mark tried to save face. "What's it to you, Jake? Defending your new girlfriend?" he answered back, his voice modulating between mockery and defiance. A dismissive glance came from Jake, with a firm reply. "It's about decency. Maybe something you might want to look up." In this, his mere presence seemed to change the atmosphere. The bully's confidence was waning as he shot them his look. He gave a little huff and backed off, his minions following him slowly with a mix of reluctance and relief, as the tension simply drained out of the air, leaving Jake and Zaina standing in the suddenly, eerily quiet hallway. "Are you okay?" he now asked in that softer voice, his voice speaking to Zaina. His eyes traveled through hers and into the depths, searching for signs of discomfort, signs of alarm. Sure enough, Zaina's heart was still pounding, but she managed to nod. "Yes, thanks," she replied, her voice lowered. She was not accustomed to confrontations, never mind to being defended. Jake must have seen something in her expression, for he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Nobody should have to put up with that kind of crap," he said. He hesitated, looking like he was deciding whether to say something. Finally, he added, "If you ever want some company or someone to talk to, I'm around." Zaina looked up at him, her face expressing cautious curiosity. "Thank you, Jake," she said, strange but in a nice way. Jake nodded and continued down the hallway. A sense of warmth began to grease over Zaina in that cold, clinical corridor. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt a flicker of something like hope, an ember that might yet be coaxed into a warmer, brighter flame. Chapter 3: Odd Friendship. It had been a subtle but overt turning in the winds of Zaina's high school experience, one that Jake's intervention in the hallway had, in fact, seemingly turned the tide for a moment. But at least for the moment, whispers still followed in her wake, while the open attacks had abated. It was under these new circumstances that Zaina found herself unexpectedly looking forward to lunch. What had been a place of hermetically sealed social combat, structural in its rigidity of clique and rank, was now revealed, in her eyes, to contain a subtext of potential rendezvous. Jake had started to sit with her at her usual secluded spot at the back of the room. Their lunches had become a daily appointment that neither acknowledged nor discussed. Today, Jake arrived bearing a tray with the usual cafeteria fare. A hamburger that was more bread than beef and a pile of fries that were a day's march away from golden. Zaina, with her modest tray of a small salad and a carton of milk, watched him come up to the table with anticipation and a little nervousness. "Hope I'm not intruding." Jake grinned at her as he slid into the seat across from her. It was not lost on Zaina how the casual guy thing totally belied the way he had scoped out the room for threats before taking a seat. It was protective, but not in a way that made her feel suffocated. "Not at all," Zaina responded, and her soft voice was a melody that danced atop the clatter in the cafeteria. She began to like his being here, and somewhat to her surprise, she had grown used to it. In the beginning, they shied away from the deeps of personal revelation and talked, instead, about safe, more neutral territories. Teachers whose eccentricities turned them into school legend, homework stacks that formed the bane of any student. At least those were the things they talked about. But days turned into weeks, and the topics allowed more, marginalizing into favorites on books and music, dreams for the future, and subtle hints about their respective pasts. A cutting, long-lighted autumn was falling through the cafeteria windows as it was beginning to fade that day, and it was then that Jake introduced the topic they had circled since their lunches had begun. "So, Zaina," he began, pausing just a moment, "you've told me a bit about Valera before. What? What was it like? I mean, your life there?" Zaina paused, the fork halfway from her mouth. Her dreamy eyes were watching into a spot far away as she amassed her thoughts. It was different, she began to speak, her voice infused with a tinge of nostalgia quite fitting for her very words. "Valera is vibrant, alive in a way hard to describe. Cities with bioluminescent lights made them appear as if built from grand, soft glows, and the skies. Oh, the skies, colors never before seen on Earth." Jake looked at Rook, his mind running wild with her description, his imagination afire with the thoughts her words conjured. "It sounds beautiful," he said, for it was the truth, wishing he was looking at it through her honest eyes. "It is," she said, a slight smile touching her lips, "but it's also challenging. Our society is very much based on knowledge and discovery, yet at the same time it is grueling. There is so much pressure to do your best and make an impact. Coming here, to Earth, was a chance to escape that a little bit anyway." Jake nodded, understanding more than she might have expected. "The pressure, sounds a bit like being expected to fit in here, doesn't it?" Zaina giggled softly, the sound like a chime in the noisy cafeteria. "Yes, I suppose it does." Their talk then skittered about to lighter matters, but a bridge had been built, a connection forged from shared confidences and a realization, maybe subconscious, that they lived in totally different worlds. As they finished and went back toward the class, Zaina felt a warmth that wasn't really because of the crowded cafeteria or the lingering heat of a dying summer. Jake now also felt it, a sense so unfamiliar and warmly unexpected, fellow feeling. He glanced at Zaina and saw her profile brighten with the flaring light of the setting sun. He felt the usual protective instinct and respect deepen within him. As they said their goodbyes to each other, seeing off each other at the corridor to their respective classes, there was an implicit promise in their goodbyes, a friendship that was only beginning to bud, one that will grow from this fertile soil of knowledge and acceptance.